with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Wednesday, October 7th, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, former economics columnist for Harper's and New York Times, author and journalist Jeff Madrick on Invisible Americans, the tragic cost of child poverty. Also on the program today, it's Miller time. At least 34 people connected to Donald Trump are COVID positive. Stephen Miller, just the latest, as the West Wing is in disarray. I'm not sure if that's a new thing or just a continuing of an old show. Department of Justice Inspector General draft report leaks shows Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein are just as despicable as you could imagine. Trump announces no more COVID economic stimulus, and then sort of changes his mind, and then sort of changes his mind again. Dr. Fauci warns us that we could see 400,000 coronavirus deaths without a course change quickly. And it's debate night. Kamala Harris, Mike Pence, and a lot of plastic barriers. Can you blame her? St. Louis gun couple, stars of the Republican National Convention, indicted on multiple counts by a grand jury. And in functioning government news, the European Parliament backs a 60% emission cut by 2030. The first federal election with ranked choice will go forward in Maine despite Republican attempts to stop it. And the White House blocking FDA vaccine guidelines, but people who care about people's health are seeking a workaround. All this and more on today's program. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today. We have a debate tonight, 9 p.m. It's going to be on all the networks. We're also going to stream it with commentary on Majority.fm and our various outlets. So you can check that out. It should be interesting. There will be, despite the fact that Mike Pence did not want one initially, a plexiglass barrier between the candidates. Because apparently the Trump campaign, they don't believe in testing before you go to a debate. And I have to say, I mean, they don't seem too interested in finding out what happened on that day in terms of Donald Trump's test. I mean, presumably the president's tested every day. And the White House either doesn't seem terribly interested in releasing that information, or they don't seem terribly interested in it at all. Who knows? So, I mean, frankly, if I'm Kamala Harris, I'm wearing a gas mask before I get anywhere close to anybody around the White House. But maybe she's got a little bit more courage, frankly, than I do. I don't know if I'm going to get to this today. I may get to it tomorrow, but I just want to highlight for you, because I don't want this to get lost in the news. This IG report, the Inspector General report from the Department of Justice, it's leaked. It's just a draft. By the time it gets public, who knows how whitewashed it'll be. But the behavior of Jeff Sessions and Rod Rosenstein in regards to what they call family separation, which I think still can only be described as kidnapping of immigrant children at the border, it is shocking. They are chastising U.S. attorneys at the border for not prosecuting families, for not separating families with babies. Babies who are literally breastfeeding. They want them separated and then just shipped off somewhere. It would be nice in this country if we had any type of tradition, and it rarely happens. We had one guy from the DHS who was head of the, or I should say HHS, specifically the subdivision that handled safe vaccines, resigned from the government today. But it would be nice if we had in this culture a more substantial tradition of resigning out of disgust, because I think those 5 or 6 U.S. attorneys at the border, that would have been a good thing for them to do. I don't know how you stay in your job and if your job is to basically kidnap immigrant babies. That to me is just disgusting. We will talk about that later in the program, either today or we'll get to it tomorrow. In the meantime, Donald Trump did one of the crazy, now I know this is hard to believe. Of course, he's done a lot more crazy things than this. But in terms of politics, what Donald Trump did last night was really a stunning display. The only thing it leads me to believe is that he got off the phone with Mitch McConnell and did not understand. I mean, this is a guy who, whenever he gets briefings about politics, you get the sense that he doesn't get that there's a difference between the subtext and the text. This is the reason why you're doing it, and then this is the reason why you're going to say you're going to do it. He doesn't get that. He apparently got it as to why when he was lying about COVID, but these things maybe are just too complicated. The story goes like this. It's been reported that Mitch McConnell got on the phone with Donald Trump and told him, look, there's no point in pursuing any more COVID economic relief. Let's just focus on the courts. This is unsurprising because Mitch McConnell probably perceives a pretty good chance that Donald Trump is going to lose. And what Mitch McConnell cares about is cementing his legacy as the guy who changed the federal courts in such a way that it will ripple through the generations. And it will. In 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, we'll still be talking about this term of Donald Trump in regards to federal judges and the Supreme Court. There may be other things too. And I'm presuming that Donald Trump is not the president in the next term. And so that's all Mitch McConnell cares about. He's going to go into the history books as the guy who fundamentally altered the federal judiciary for decades to come. So he must have said this to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump, let's put up the tweets. This is where it starts. Donald Trump says, effectively, Nancy Pelosi is asking for $2.4 trillion to bail out poorly run, high-crime Democrat states. Now, the fact of the matter is that red states are devastated by this as well. They rely on sales taxes. Many of these red states do. And sales taxes have really taken the biggest brunt of the hit in terms of revenue drops in the states. Nevertheless, money that is no way related to COVID-19, that's absurd. We made a very generous offer of $1.6 trillion, and as usual, she is not negotiating in good faith. I am rejecting their request and looking to the future of our country. I have instructed my representatives to stop negotiating until after the election, when immediately after I win, we will pass a major stimulus bill that focuses on hardworking Americans and small businesses. I have asked Mitch McConnell not to delay, but to instead focus full time on approving my outstanding nominee to the United States Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett. Our economy is doing very well. The stock market is at record levels, jobs and unemployment also coming back in record numbers. In fact, actually, the job numbers are starting to go the opposite direction. Stock market got a little bit concerned about the failure of relief. Mitch McConnell probably looked at those tweets and said, well, he sort of got what I was telling him to do. But to announce as the president of the United States, I am calling off all negotiations to get relief to the American public, is basically handing the Democrats a huge, huge gift, which is it's quite clear they don't care about providing relief. I mean, look, the Democrats passed the HEROES Act. What was it, 4 months ago? More at this point? Republicans passed nothing. They couldn't even meet in conference to negotiate it out. They passed nothing. Democrats passed another one, a $2.2 trillion bill, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. Republicans passed nothing. You could argue if you're Donald Trump, like, oh, we're trying to negotiate, but Nancy Pelosi won't move, blah, blah, blah. But if you end it yourself and you announce that you're ending it, it's on you. And so somebody, and he must be sitting alone in his, I don't know, in the White House. And somebody was like, hey, what's going on? Get on the phone. Tell him to tweet something else. And so then we get this. Crazy Nancy Pelosi and the radical left Democrats were just playing games. I don't know why that's in quotes. With the, I don't know. Maybe that means something different. What is quotes? Why would you put that in quotes, Matt?
I think it's somebody. Yeah, I have no idea, actually.
It wasn't literally games. They weren't playing actual games. They weren't, Nancy Pelosi wasn't playing like, Yahtzee. And then with the desperately needed workers' stimulus program payments. They just wanted to take care of Democrat failed high crime cities and states. His capitalization stuff is a little bit weird. They were never into it to help the workers, and they never will be. So now he's a little bit concerned. And then he goes, the House and Senate should immediately approve $25 billion for airline payroll support and $135 billion for Paycheck Protection Program for small business. There's still money in the Paycheck Protection Program, or if there isn't, it's simply because it sat in there and it expired. That's over. Those people have lost their jobs. Both these will be fully paid for with unused funds from the CARES Act. Well, it's the same. Have this money. I will sign now. Have this money. I will sign now. I don't know. If I am sent, wow. This is at 10:18, and I think things are getting a little hazy for him. If I am sent, I see what he's saying. If I am sent a standalone bill for stimulus checks, $1,200, they will go out to our great people immediately. I'm ready to sign right now. Are you listening, Nancy? Where's the Senate bill? There's no Senate bill about $1,200 checks. So he realizes that he had a huge, huge political fail. And Democrats all around the country now, I would imagine, are going to be running on that first tweet, in addition to healthcare. In the meantime, the American public is suffering. And our guest coming up in a moment, Jeff Madrick, is going to tell us that the people who are suffering the most are the children of this country. And they have been for a long time. And he's got some ideas on how to fix that. They won't happen under the Trump administration. I don't know if they would happen under a Biden administration, but we can try. Before we get to Jeff Madrick, a couple words from our sponsors. As you know, I am a big proponent of dental hygiene. And as you get older, you start to realize you may have made mistakes in the past in terms of your dental hygiene. Well, I have corrected all mine with Quip. And I haven't just corrected it with me in my home. Both my children now have Quips. My older daughter has the full-size Quip. My son has the small Quip. I swear to God to you. He said to me last night, it was 2 nights ago. I think last night, actually, he was yelling at me. 2 nights ago. He said, you know why I like to brush teeth now? And I said, why is that? Now, he's been brushing with Quip, I don't know, for about 6, 7, 8 months. I don't know. And I no longer have to worry about like count your ABCs thing. And then he races through it because it has a pulsing thing that tells you it counts out 2 minutes, tells you to switch the 4 quadrants of your mouth. They have watermelon flavored toothpaste for the kids. I mean, I use it sometimes too, but don't tell him I do that. And he loves it. Brushes every morning. I don't even. I sometimes I have to remind him, but I don't have to badger him. And that's the point. You can get the. It doesn't matter what kind of toothbrush you have. At the end of the day, you got to use it. And Quip makes their electric toothbrush easy to use. It is not a big bulky thing. It's not going to fall off your small pedestal sink. It's almost the size of a regular toothbrush. It's very stylish, frankly. And what they do, they send you a Quip brush head, toothpaste, floss, dental floss. They deliver it on a dentist recommended schedule every 3 months. You got to change out that toothbrush head for just $5 each. Shipping is free. You can join 3 million happy customers using Quip, starting at $25. Folks, I've given these as presents. They're awesome. They're easy to take with you too when you're traveling. They're not a big bulky thing that you can't fit in your Dob kit. Do we still call it a Dob kit? If you go to getquip.com/majority right now, you get your first refill free. That's your first refill free at getquip.com/majority. Spelled get, G-E-T, Quip, QUIP.com/majority. Quip, the good habits company. Also, everybody has watched all their playlists. You're tired of the same shows you've been watching over and over again. Well, ExpressVPN lets you change your location so you can control where you want sites to think you're located. Now, this gives you added privacy as you're streaming, as you're looking around the web. What it also does is it allows you to view from almost 100 different countries to watch all sorts of different streaming platforms, right? So what you do is you open the app, you select a location, you tap one button to connect. It's super easy. I got it on my phone. I got it on my iPad. I get it on my computer, but mostly it's an iPad and phone thing for me. You tap one button to connect. You refresh the page to access thousands of new shows and movies. You choose from almost 100 different countries. You can watch Studio Ghibli films on UK Netflix, anime on Japanese Netflix. I've turned some people on to some, a buddy of mine, he's got a kid who loves Japanese anime. For the life of me, I don't understand any of it, but ExpressVPN has now opened up that door for them. I'm trying to introduce Mila to Doctor Who, the one you can only get in the UK. They also have Star Trek Discovery, I think it is, on UK Netflix. Here, you can't get it. It's paywalled. But all you got to do is fire up your ExpressVPN. You can also stream in HD, no problem whatsoever, no buffering, no lag. Not only does it let you change your location, like I say, it encrypts your data and lets you surf the web safely and anonymously. Check it out. It opens it up. It doesn't matter. Hulu, BBC, iPlayer, YouTube, all change your location and check out a whole mess of new shows that are just simply not available in this country for whatever reason. I'm not sure I understand the dynamics of that, but that's the fact. Go to expressvpn.com/majority. Get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free. expressvpn.com/majority. Check that out. And lastly, as you know, flu season right around the corner. We are dealing with a whole mess of mess, as it were. You got to take care of yourself, proper vitamins, stay hydrated. That's why Liquid IV created Hydration Multiplier Plus immune support to maintain and strengthen your immune system. Now, look, every day, one of these cups is full of their matcha energy drink, Liquid IV. And now what I'm doing every morning, before I even head into work, I'm doing immune support. I'm also doing other stuff too. Like I'm eating Brazil nuts, a couple of Brazil nuts a day. Somebody told me that was a good thing to do, but the immune support is something that I can trust. And I know for a fact it's going to help me. Has vitamin C, has vitamin D, has zinc, has Wellmune, all in a convenient single serving packet. Vitamin C and D and zinc, you probably know, are great for your immune system support. And Wellmune, which is a naturally sourced beta glucan, it's proven to help strengthen your immune system. Each packet is bursting with fresh, natural tangerine flavor. It tastes really good. It's like orange juice, except for it's not just, sort of pasteurized. It actually has enhanced vitamins, build your immune system. And in response to COVID-19, products are being donated to hospitals, first responders, food banks, veterans, and active military. Liquid IV, on top of that, donates a serving of Liquid IV to someone in need. Check out their new Hydration Multiplier Plus immune support system. It's available at Walmart, or you can get 25% off when you go to liquidiv.com. Use the code MajorityRep at checkout. That's 25% off anything you order when you use the promo code MajorityRep at liquidiv.com. Get better hydration today at liquidiv.com, promo code Majority Report. All right, quick break, and then we're going to come back with Jeff Madrick. We are back. Joining us now on the program, I want to welcome back to the show former economics columnist for Harper's and the New York Times, regular contributor to the New York Review of Books and The Nation. He's a visiting professor of humanities at the Cooper Union and the director of the Bernard L. Schwartz Rediscovering Government Initiative, fellow at the Century Foundation, and found time to author multiple books. Jeff Madrick, his latest, The Invisible Americans, Tragic Cost of Child Poverty. Jeff, welcome to the program. Oh, we got a sound issue. Jeff, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Sorry,
Okay.
you were muted. Welcome back to the program. I think it's been a couple of years since.
I'm sure, but who can count?
These
an
days,
eventful couple of years.
Exactly. Pretty appropriate timing for this. I mean, obviously, I guess maybe part of the problem is that the appropriateness of the timing for this has been sort of ongoing for years and years, and that is in many respects the problem. Let's start with this. It's a broad question, but it's an important one. What is it that we don't understand, do you think, as a body politic, as a society, about child poverty?
Well, the reason I did this book is I was shocked when I started to look at the data. We have the highest child poverty rate among major rich nations, basically the highest child poverty rate among any rich nation, with one or two minor exceptions, and usually higher by far than any rich nation. The thing is, I found in reporting and discussing this issue with people, they don't fully believe poor children. Many don't even believe there are poor children in America. Now, a poor child lives in a family of three, let's say, that earns $21,000 a year, a family of four, 25 or 26. Those are the official poverty numbers, and they vastly understate poverty. What I want to say mostly about children in poverty is they suffer. They suffer for lack of opportunity. They suffer from the shame of being poor. They know they're poor. But they suffer mostly, maybe I shouldn't even say mostly, from being cognitively deprived. They have less education. They have lower IQs. I have to say, in the last 20 to 30 years, academic researchers have done extraordinary work trying to isolate the effects of poverty on these kids. Poverty causes reduced IQ. Poverty causes reduced educational attainment, and it continues on to adulthood. They work fewer hours. They make less money. That is to say, young adults who grew up in poverty. So what I want, when you ask that question, and I want to emphasize, and I hope I've been doing it adequately, that these kids suffer. They are often in ill health. They know they are outsiders in a society. And we ask them to be responsible for themselves because we don't provide adequate aid to their parents.
Give us, a sense. Is there a and what are we talking about in terms of numbers?
Well, we're talking 10 to 20 million kids are poor. One of the great problems in America, and it reflects our attitudes towards the poor, which are pretty much that the poor are responsible for their own poverty. That's been historically true now for a couple of hundred years, the general attitudes. The measure of poverty in America is totally inadequate. At least 10 million are poor. Many of us, if we measured it correctly, it would be 20 million and even 30 million kids poor. That is the point at which deprivation sets in and affects future prospects.
Okay, so when we say what is that? What does it mean to be poor? Does that what is the definition? I mean, I understand the numbers, what we're talking about in terms of numbers, but in terms of practice, are we talking about you're skipping meals? You are there's not proper daycare, I guess, proper daycare, I guess, not exactly how we would define, or any daycare.
Yeah.
So
let me go over that. I have a chapter in the book, Invisible Americans, on this. The most telling problem for poor kids is that they are hungry. They may not be starving in a traditional way, but some of them are. They get poor nutrition and they go hungry day after day. If they don't have access to federal lunches in school and federal breakfasts, they are in trouble nutritionally. When the pandemic hit, this was especially dangerous for them because they didn't have school lunches. So first, they're hungry. Secondly, they're often sick and don't get adequate attention. That's pretty serious. They can be born with prenatal problems, postnatal problems. So they're often less healthy. They have inferior educations. They tend to go to schools that are underfunded in the states they're in compared to other schools. And those schools usually have high proportions of poor kids. So they don't get to learn from other better off kids. They don't necessarily have enough clothes. Their parents don't necessarily have heat and electricity. There are all kinds of deprivations, and the deprivation levels are actually higher, the deprivation rates, when you measure the kinds of things I just discussed, than the poverty rate itself. They don't have much of a chance. And I want to emphasize the point that they are ashamed. They know, as I said at the outset, they are poor. And when people make fun of their parents for buying them sneakers or iPhones, middle-class people just don't understand. These kids are not showing off. They just want to belong and they don't want to be ashamed. There is an attitude towards poor people in this country, and this is a world globally, actually, that disrespects the poor. It shows little respect for the poor. And my book, if anything, is about that, because I want to give unconditional cash allowances to parents of poor kids.
Yeah, I want to get to that that solution, but I want to talk about a couple of those other things that you touched on here. We know, and I've seen different measures of this, but we know that children living in poverty, when they enter into pre-K or K, more often. I mean, now we have universal pre-K in New York City, for instance, but that is not the typical around the country. We know that when they enter kindergarten, they have a vocabulary deficit, the number of words that they have been exposed to is dramatically less. I've seen, various measures in the tens of thousands that in terms of the range, but we know this basically because they have been given less real world experiences because it costs money to have these experiences. They have less attention from adults because their parents, may be struggling to get by and maybe going out and trying to find work. Maybe they are just sat in front of the TV because there isn't, any money for daycare. So they start off behind the ball, and that just continues through because so much is they're not getting supplemented in any way.
That's I do discuss the vocabulary issue in my book. That's one of many. It's one of the more dramatic illustrations of the issue, but there are even more dramatic illustrations. Neurologists have pretty much confirmed that poor kids, deprived 0 to 3, certainly 0 to 6, literally have brain damage. Their brains do not develop as rapidly as their peers. The good news is if they are treated better later on, their gray matter can begin to be restored, but often they're simply not. So that's one example. There are a couple of pathways that academics like to talk about. One is poor parents just don't have enough money to buy the goods, the food, certainly the educational materials for these kids. The second issue is important, though. Those poor parents, single parents or dual parents, live under stress, and they communicate that to the children. That's a big cause of the neural damage, the gray matter damage I've been discussing. So there are two pathways that this occurs, and they're very well documented. This is not some fanciful bleeding heart idea.
Yeah, it escapes me now, and I think it must have been years ago that we interviewed someone who had done this research on stress, and it's incredibly disturbing. I think that sort of like intuitively you think like, oh, well, if you're under stress as a kid, what you're learning is to build, a tolerance for stress, and it's actually the opposite. It makes you more. It debilitates your ability to deal with stress. And that's sort of like contrary to sort of I guess maybe the typical, I don't know if it's the Puritan ethic or whatnot, this whole notion of like, how do you make steel? You melt it and it comes back stronger. It's the opposite when it comes to human beings, apparently. Yeah. All you're doing is diminishing their capacity.
There's a strong feeling in America that if you just work hard, even if you're poor, you'll get ahead. Some of that was a consequence of the post-Depression years. The poverty was the characteristic for almost everybody in the Depression. Then the economy grew, partly because of war spending, but for a variety of reasons in the 50s and 60s, and the great middle class developed. People intuitively now feel, well, we just worked hard and we could get there. Then along came publications in the early 60s that showed, hey, we did not conquer poverty. It was still 25% of the population. Michael Carrington's book was the most noteworthy, The Other American. In fact, a tidbit, he actually understated the number of poor because he didn't think people would actually believe it when he wrote it in his book. Interesting phenomenon. We have a strong bias against thinking that the poor are underprivileged. We tend to think, I think, some ugly things, that they don't work hard enough, that their parents pass on cultures that are anti-educational, but it simply doesn't, the facts just don't bear this out. They are deprived. The culture of poverty is one of the great myths of our time.
One other thing I wanted to note before we sort of move on is it's sort of the history and how we've addressed this and failed to address it, is that notion of healthcare. One of the things I think that COVID has also laid bare in some respects. I mean, certainly the issue of children getting meals at schools has been really clear, with the schools shut down. I mean, I think I was aware of how many, I don't think I was aware of just how many kids rely on the New York City schools, for instance, for lunch. We have almost over 100,000. I think it could be around 140,000 homeless children who look to lunch at school, but the numbers of students who rely on school for a school lunch is huge. And New York, to its credit, also made school lunch free for everybody. So that stigma that you were talking about, and I want to get back to that as well, was reduced. But one of the things that also became clear with COVID is that we had an assault on public hospitals in this state. And we have a lot of data that shows that your chances of dying were directly related to where you lived and what, and your wealth, because there was just simply not the hospital facilities there. And COVID reveals it in the face of what your chances are of dying in a pandemic. But underlying that means that there's a whole deficit of health services that will be there for young kids, which obviously, again, will have an impact through their lives.
Well, let me say this, the expansion, Medicaid and the expansion of Medicaid, as well as the CHIP program, which is insurance program sponsored by Senator Kennedy, with whom I wrote a book, so I feel obliged to mention his name, and the famed and rather right-wing Republican, sorry about that. Well, CHIP, in any case, has provided insurance for a lot of children. A lot of children are covered by this, and it showed improvement in their health. But you raise a significant issue. Number one, even if you're covered by insurance, parents can't always get to the doctor. Doctors, and I use doctors generically meaning all health services. The health services are not always available, as you mentioned. So we have a serious healthcare problem. In fact, in my view, our health services industry is our biggest problem. We spend more, as you well know, you probably covered this 50 or 100 times, but we spend more than any other nation per person. And for the most part, we have, with a few exceptional areas, have poorer outcomes. So I think the COVID situation has shown this up to be what it is. But I do want to note that we have made progress covering children with health insurance.
All right. So let's talk about the cost of child poverty. Obviously, there's, if we're not talking just in terms of humanity, there's some people who want to know, is it cost effective for us to deal with child poverty? There's hidden cost associated with child poverty that, beyond the human suffering, although personally, I sort of feel like that's where the conversation probably should end. But for others, they want to see, what's the cost effectiveness? I mean, we have hidden costs associated with poverty to society that are not necessarily, I think, obvious to people.
Well, Sam, that's, I think, what bothers me the most. A nation that worries about its productivity, that is to say, its source of economic growth, allows, from my point of view, 20 to 30% of its kids to founder cognitively disadvantaged. And the data show they work less when they get older, they don't work as well, they make fewer wages. Some economists and sociologists have put an estimate on how much we lose due to child poverty alone, due to lower productivity, due to poor health, meaning more social services, due to the incarceration and the cost of incarceration, due to the need for more anti-poverty programs. It amounts roughly to $1 trillion a year. 5%. That's a pretty widely accepted number now. It was accepted by a broad range of analysts from right to left who did a report for the National Academy of Sciences. So I think that states it most clearly. If we got child poverty down, we could have, don't call it $1 trillion, call it just $500 billion, 2.5% of the economy. 2.5% of the economy is the amount the economy might grow in a year. And that just keeps building. It's pretty serious.
And that's, for folks, if just simply the sheer the desire to minimize misery isn't enough. Let's talk about
But as you hint, it should be enough.
Right, of course. But it's also nice to know that this is a smart investment, too, for people who are concerned about things like productivity. What are the things that we've done in the past to attempt to address it? I mean, you mentioned already S-chip. That was Kennedy, as you said, and I think it was Orrin Hatch was the Republican who co-sponsored that bill. And we also had the expansion of Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. That, of course, is in jeopardy now because of the lawsuit that the Trump administration is pursuing with the Supreme Court. And we will know more about that.
And they also want to attach work requirements to the parents who
Indeed, which, of course, makes it difficult because a lot of times people aren't working because they can't find a job.
There are no jobs.
Exactly. And so aside from those things that have materially impacted child poverty, or at least the health of children, what are the other things that we have done in an attempt to address it to the extent that we have? And what has how effective have they been?
Since the 1990s or even the 1980s, our social policy has been jobs oriented. Earned income tax credit. You get benefits if you work. The more you make, the better the benefits for up to a point. That has helped reduce child poverty, the earned income tax credit. It's been made more generous a few times. The child tax credit, adopted, I think it was 1996, but my memory, as you noted with Orrin Hatch, is starting to get dim.
We're all there right now.
Child tax credit now is $2,000. This is very important. $2,000 a year, and it only does not reach a third of kids fully because their parents don't make enough money. In my view, the beginning of this work-dependent social welfare was in some sense the end of a decent America. We used to give people cash when they needed it. Now, not all those welfare programs worked very well, but they could have been tuned differently than to become workfare programs. So we have a $2,000 child tax credit. That's been beneficial, but now there is a bill that the House passed. You probably know about this. Of course, you know about the CARE and HEROES Act. And in the Senate, there's an American Family Act sponsored by Sherrod Brown and other senators. There we go. Which would expand the child tax credit from $2,000 to $3,000 and to $3,600 for kids under 6. And it would go to everybody. In other words, everyone would qualify and be sent money even if their parents made no money. In other words, before you only got paid as a tax credit against earnings. That's a couple of examples. I think more is needed. I hope we'll get a chance to talk about that.
Well, yes, we will in just a moment. But I just walk through for people who don't know what the earned income tax credit is, and even what a tax credit is as opposed to a deduction. Because I think people hear these things and they don't know what it is. I mean, clearly the way that we have designed these programs is the implication is you don't want to work. We're going to try and convince you to work by making it a little bit more lucrative than it would be otherwise, which, I mean, obviously has, if I can find a job and I get the job and it makes it a little more lucrative, that helps. And as you said, it's had some impact. But one of the big problems is I can't find a job. And so it's contingent upon something I can't do, and I get no benefits for that. But just explain to a totally a layperson about a tax credit, and then we'll talk about what your proposal is.
So you get if you make $500 a year, let's say if you make $25,000 a year, you have to pay federal income tax on that money. The earned income tax credit allows you to pay less tax on that money, depending on how much you are earning. So if you're way down at the bottom, it supplements the income you're earning because it's reducing your tax bill. It's an effective remedy, but I don't think it's a great remedy for two reasons. One is you may not be able to get a job, but two, more important, you won't get a good paying job. The benefit is bigger if you make more money. The absolute dollars you will save because you would have paid more tax, and the way it's structured, you get more of a credit. The same is true for child tax credit if you have children. It works the same way. It's dependent on your income. So here's the thing. People began to like this in the 80s when they got disenchanted with welfare. Partly the welfare system wasn't working, but it wasn't working as badly as the anti-welfare people said. And Bill Clinton decided it's the end of the era of big government. One thing we're going to do is reform our welfare system and make it based on work. That was an example. But the earned income tax credit, he also expanded in those years, which was valuable. I don't think it's perfect, though. The social welfare money in America used to go in greater percentage to those who made below the poverty line. Now that's been reduced. Hillary Hans and other scholars show that quite clearly. Robert Moffat, it's very clear. The reason is we depend on these earned income tax credits rather than depending on actual welfare programs.
Right. And a lot of people, me amongst them, have been very critical of that welfare reform during the Clinton years, because as soon as jobs, the jobs available contracted, many people, the number of extreme poor increased as a result. People living in what they call extreme poverty, increased as a result of those, so-called reforms that Newt Gingrich was all excited about.
You basically only have two welfare programs: the food stamps and TANF, which is very limited and doesn't reach very poor people.
So let's talk about your plan. It's very straightforward, and we should also say, in this era of COVID, there is data coming out of COVID, the first CARES Act that went out, that in many respects sort of like, gives you all the evidence you need that your prescription is the right one.
Yeah.
Talk about this.
Well, my prescription comes from a couple of places in my head and heart, forgive me. One is we can't keep treating poor parents like they can't take care of their kids. If the big reason we don't want to give cash is that we think they're going to waste the money on themselves. The evidence is that they don't. It's not only evidence in the US. Almost all rich democracies give a cash allowance of some kind or other. Canada, we do, in my think tank, which is part of the supported by Bernard L. Schwartz, we presented the Canadian proposal and talked about how much it would help America if we adopted the Canadian cash proposal. So my attitude is simple. Poor kids need a lot of things, but mostly they need money. And this is not just wishful thinking. One of the things discovered by academics over the last 20 years is the value of money itself. They're in constant, I talk about this, I think I have a chapter in the book that talks about how money matters. The one colorful example is an Indian tribe that developed a very successful casino, and they gave $5,000 to each family that had a child. This is
a Duke study from a Cherokee tribe in North Carolina. Is that right?
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. And they discovered their educational attainment increased, the crime rate decreased. That is compared to their peers in similar tribes and in similar economic circumstances. But that was but one example of how cash can matter. So my view is, let's give them cash, $3,000 or $4,000 per child a year, maybe $5,000. Some nations go higher than that. And let the parents figure out how to use that cash best. Buying them a warm coat, having electricity in the wintertime, and buying them books, computers possibly, at least an internet service. And let's treat parents in a respectful way. And I think they'll act in a respectful way if we do that.
Well, we know from the COVID payments that were sent out at the beginning of the crisis, back when there was at least some attempt to provide relief for Americans. We know that the cash payments ended up reducing the poverty rate. I mean, in a way that it sounds quite obvious, but all the data was there. And the other thing is, we also know sort of ideologically, we keep hearing that, you want to localize You want to give school boards the right to expend their own cash. Well, this is that principle, but on a very meaningful level, and that is let parents trust parents of children to figure it out. Of course, on the margins of every single endeavor that humans undertake, I think there's people who don't do the right thing, or they waste it, or whatever it is. But the bulk is important. Now, what you're proposing is also universal, right? I mean, so
universal and taxable, so that if you make higher incomes, it'll be taxed away. The universality is a little bit like Social Security is universal. You want to have everybody, you want to have broad public support for this kind of thing. But let me also say that giving them cash, you raised a good point, Sam, giving them cash got poverty down. But now we know getting poverty down gives these kids a chance in school to get good jobs, to be healthy, to be emotionally stable, on, and not to have brain damage.
Let me lastly add this thing about the universality. People are always talking about means testing, whatnot. We have a way of means testing that is very efficient. This also applies to Social Security for that matter, which is you give everyone a universal amount and you claw it back on the back end with taxes, because we already have an apparatus to determine, taxes. We already have a tax rate. We don't need to create another bureaucracy to see and to force people to jump through hoops to get it in the first place. We could just do it on the back end through taxes. It's the most efficient way. And it also retains support for this program, so people aren't thinking that other people are getting benefits that they're not getting.
Of course, I'd love to raise the progressive tax rate as well. So
you and I both, we can do that as well after we do the heavy lifting of getting those payments out. Jeff Madrick, the book is Invisible Americans: Tragic Cost of Child Poverty. We'll put a link to that book at majority.fm.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
And remember, Sam, it's not the kids' fault that they're poor.
Indeed.
So let's not blame them.
Indeed. Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate it. I'm reminded of the story that Paul Ryan told. It was, and I raised this many times on the show, and I can't remember exactly where he was, but it was a story that he heard from, I think it was a Wisconsin official. And the story, incidentally, was fake. Not only did Paul Ryan sort of embellish it, and it didn't happen to him, but the story in the first place was fake. And it was something to the effect of they were justifying cutting school lunches. And the story that he told was that he met a kid and he said to the kid, "Oh, we have the clip. It's at CPAC 2014. Let's play this clip." People need to remember what we're experiencing with Donald Trump is simply an extension of what we had with the Republican Party for decades. When Donald Trump goes out there and he's going to make the case that all this mail-in ballot stuff is corrupt, and he's going to try and invalidate the election results in this state or that state because of mail-in ballots, people should remember that when he started talking about 3 million immigrants being bussed up from Massachusetts to go vote in New Hampshire or whatever it was, Paul Ryan was one of the people who was saying these late results coming in from California, very suspicious. Very suspicious. It's not only Donald Trump, folks. It's the Republican Party. Here's a clip of Paul Ryan back at CPAC in 2014, I guess it was. CPAC is where it's sort of like a Comic-Con for conservatives, and they're all, it has gotten more and more, frankly, insane since even 2014. It's always been a little bit nuts, but it's gotten even more crazy. Play this clip.
Is making a big mistake here. What they're offering people is a full stomach and an empty soul. The American people want more than that. You know, this reminds me of a story I heard from Eloise Anderson. She serves in the cabinet of my buddy, Governor Scott Walker. She once met a young boy from a very poor family. And every day at school, he would get a free lunch from a government program. He told Eloise he didn't want a free lunch. He wanted his own lunch, one in a brown paper bag, just like the other kids. He wanted one, he said, because he knew a kid with a brown paper bag had someone who cared for him. This is what the left does not understand.
Now, first off, the story turns out to be apocryphal. It never happened. But aside from that, you got to tear this apart and think about the implications here. He wants to cancel free school lunch with the presumption that it's really just because his mom or dad doesn't care about him, as opposed to cost. Now, Paul Ryan would also have a problem with Jeff Madrick's proposal. Let's give that parents money. And he would have a problem with everybody gets free lunch in the school. Therefore, there is no stigma attached with getting that lunch. But the implication here is that if you are living in poverty and you do not have the money, your folks don't have the money to buy lunch for you, they don't care about you. This is all about, the Republicans have been working on this for years. And maybe it's been just in decades. And maybe it's the broader American thing. This notion that if you are poor, you are in some way morally deficient. And one of the reasons why when Donald Trump, we used to say this all the time, in the lead up to the Republican primary debates in 2016, I guess it was 2015, we used to say this all the time, that the Republicans have been arguing for years that if you don't have money, you are morally inferior. You're just inferior. The corollary to that is if you do have money, you are morally superior. And for months, we were saying Donald Trump is going to get on that stage and he's going to look around with these other people and he's just going to say, I'm a billionaire. So what I say is right and what you guys say is wrong because I'm a billionaire. And in fact, that was implicit in everything that went on in that primary race. And that is because the Republicans had built this hierarchy. Remember, they wanted a CEO president at one point too? They built it. They have built this hierarchy where if you are wealthy, you are morally righteous. And Paul Ryan was just putting it on display there. He was couching it as if Democrats want parents not to care for their kids. The left wants parents not to care for the kids. They just want it's absurd. It's also not a true story. I mean, it's one thing to say I want my parents to care about me, but it's another to say I'm not going to eat if I don't want to eat. I don't need to eat. There is a lot of problems that predate Donald Trump and will be with us past Donald Trump.
You could economically empower those parents to have, more time and ability to make those sandwiches for those kids.
There's a myriad of ways of addressing that. And Paul Ryan's only one is we will help you out if you can find a job when you can't find one. We'll help you out if you can find a job even though you don't have daycare. It is, and we should also add, just to put a cherry on top of this, Paul Ryan ended up going to college because when his dad died, Social Security, this is the program that Paul Ryan was looking for years desperately to cut. Social Security stepped in. Part of that social insurance is for orphans and widowers, and more or less paid for his college. And it seems, I don't know. I mean, I wonder if he feels like his parents didn't care for him or his mom didn't care for him because they didn't pay for his college. And the whole point of free lunches is because society cares about its children. I mean, that is exactly why you do that. So when that kid gets lunch, not only does his family care about him, but it's basically our collective way of saying we care about you. We think you have value as a human being. We think that you should get the bare minimum of what a human being needs. Maybe we need to raise the value of that bare minimum, and maybe as a society, we need to get there when it comes to things like housing and healthcare, and in addition to nutrition, to the extent that we do that, and maybe even just like the ability to, like, I don't know, live a fairly secure existence without having to worry about these things. That's something to aspire to, anyways. So, I don't know. Hope springs eternal with that kind of thing. We will, in the second hour, we're going to talk a little bit about one of the things that I've found amazing, and we should say again, we will be doing live coverage tonight of the debate with Pence and Harris. I don't know how do you guys think? We just got a minute and a half here before we sign off. Just a reminder, we are on the Choice channel on the Peacock app, and you can watch the show there if you missed any part of this program. It replays at 5 p.m. and then replays through the night, as well as Mehdi Hassan's show and Zerlina Maxwell's show. And they're going to be adding more shows there. But we just, Matt, Brendan, give me your sense. We got a minute left. What's the debate be like? We should tell people also, Matt and Brendan are here. They're in a remote location. Their voices in my head.
I hope that Kamala treats it more like a prosecution than a debate, and if she does that, she'll be fine.
Brendan?
I think that is the only way that I will stay awake through this debate, and I'm very hopeful in that sense.
Yeah, I have a feeling I'm going to be drinking heavily if the last debate was any indication, but I have a feeling this one's going to be a lot more sort of traditional. But yeah, I would like. I hope. What I would like to see is Kamala Harris get up there and ask a couple of questions as to, like, hey, when did you guys in the White House know that the president was infected? I mean, I ask that only from a perspective of, self-survival. It's very odd the way they handled that. But all right, we're going to sign off for those folks just joining us for the first hour, and then we will be back with our second one. And what do we got today? Well, Wednesday. All right. So Jamie's going to join us for the fun half today. And just a reminder, it's your support that keeps this program chugging along. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. I'm psyched about this syndication deal that we have with the MSNBC. I guess, I don't know what they call it. Sister channel? The Choice? I'm not sure. Is that what they call it? The Choice. The best thing about it is that we're basically on a platform with, we're sneaking in some stuff into the bloodstream. And we're doing it in a subtle way. And so that makes it very fun for me. It's also fun to have a clock again. I haven't had a clock in a long time, so I've got to hit certain posts so that they can cut. I guess they put commercials on there, but check it out on there. They have different graphics. They have a picture of me. We talked about this yesterday. That was a little bit awkward, but that's okay. I will take awkward photos. I'm not vain in that respect. Don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off, and the AM Quickie, ladies and gentlemen, 7 minutes. amquickie.com, 7 minutes headlines news. Somebody sent me a very odd email based upon a note that their wife sent them about, thanks for the AM Quickie, Sam Cedar was great this morning, that type of thing. It was weird. But be that as it may, check out Nomi's show today, youtube.com, the Nomi Key Show, and can't believe it. And on her show today, Christopher Halali a communist Antifa candidate running for Congress in Vermont. Jamie must be excited about that, right? Did you know about that candidate?
I did not. That's very interesting.
Also, the progressivelist.org founder, Nabila Islam, will be there. She ran for Congress. I think it was in Georgia. And Jordan Zakarian, creator of the Progressives Everywhere newsletter, 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Check it out. Jamie, what's happening on the Antifada?
So this week on the Antifada, we have a two-part collaborative commentary track with our friends Swampside Chats. We watched an episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. It's a great one. It's called Past Tense. It's the one where 3 members of the crew go back in time to a San Francisco homeless camp at the time of a historic riot against neoliberalism that eventually spiraled into international revolution, bringing them the space communism that we know and love from the normal time period of Star Trek. So it was written in the 90s, and it really accurately predicts a bunch of economic crises of the current day, including Trump's rounding up of, or his plan to round up California's homeless population into camps, and, you know, maybe the coming lumpen revolution. So check it out, patreon.com/theantifada.
Matt, what happened on TMBS this week?
Last night we had Matt Karp on to talk about how we can learn from Abe Lincoln and the radical Republicans how to scoff in the face of judicial supremacy and fight the Supreme Court. And we also talked to him about his Bernie 2020 retrospective. And then we also had Luke Mayville on to talk about Reclaim ID, the Expand Medicaid campaign that is going to have a documentary about, how to go from door to door knocking and actually turn rural states blue is actually doable. And Luke showed how to do it in this with at Reclaim ID is their movement. So that was all last night at patreon.com/TMBS and the Michael Brooks Show on YouTube.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break. Headed to the fun half, 646-257-3920. Be right back after this.
For it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt. Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dannerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are...
Psych. Fuck them. Almost says what?
What?
Almost says what? Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
deserves to be taken over by jihadists. Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Fuck things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy. I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on. Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.
We are back. Fun half, ladies and gentlemen. Let's read some IMs. AOC is reminding New Yorkers to vote for Biden on the working families party line. WFP has built more progressive power than the Greens. That is always what I have done. There are, limitations to the Working Families Party, particularly in the context of New York. In other areas, they're an actual separate party. Here, they're a fusion party, but it is always been a practice of mine to do so. Nothing's perfect, but
there's a healthy debate on the New York City left for sure on what the role of the Working Families Party is in this movement. Is it positive or negative, and how should we relate to it?
I think it's possible to overstate its positiveness, but I do think it is positive. I mean, it gave birth to Zephyr Teachout and Cynthia Nixon's races, even if they weren't directly involved in those. Ultimately, personnel is developed there. They are a resource that builds sort of like electoral strength. They're inhibited by the relationship of the unions to Cuomo, and that's a problem. But I don't think there's a Cynthia Nixon campaign without the WFP. And I don't know if you get rid of the IDC without the Cynthia Nixon campaign. And I don't know if you get any of the progressive changes we've had, and even the stuff that Cuomo has pretended to move left on, without Cynthia Nixon, frankly. And so for me, net positive. Like I say, it's possible to overstate. In New York and other states, they're even more effective because they're actually a separate party. New York, it's a little bit tougher.
I feel like Nomi knows more about this than I do. She's probably got thoughts.
Oh, she's definitely, I think, a little more jaded about the WFP than I am, without a doubt. Massachusetts, Sam. I wrote in a while ago making the case that one should vote Dem, even in a safe red state. He said, you think about it. Well, did you, punk? Yes, I am of a similar mind now. Regarding Trump's statement on the COVID aid, Trump does not care about the election results. He's going to dismiss them no matter how big the landslide. He's just wanting the chaos of it. I mean, listen, there is no world in which he doesn't care. Like, he doesn't care enough about the election results to pretend that they're negotiating with Nancy Pelosi. He could have just said to Mnuchin, like, don't come to a deal. Just go into a meeting with her and then come out and say she won't budge. To tweet that out, that's why he backtracked. It's because people were like, wait, what are you doing, dude? You can't say that we're the ones who are responsible for the end of these negotiations. Shelby. Sam, I bet Trump hasn't been tested for COVID for a while. It's an extremely uncomfortable test. Does Trump seem like the kind of person that would make himself uncomfortable, maintain safety? That's why they didn't tell us when his last negative COVID test was. Everyone around him got tested for his safety, but no way Trump was routinely tested. It's been months. It's my guess. That's an interesting theory. They do have these Abbott tests, or they were using them, that apparently are not terribly accurate when it comes to people who are asymptomatic. But let's look at this. The one thing is true. It's either he never got tested on a regular basis, like we were told that he was, which is the theory here that Shelby has on the IM, that it's just too uncomfortable for him, so he doesn't want to do it, or that he tested positive on the day of the debate and he still went. I don't believe this guy, Brian Morgenstern, who apparently is the White House Deputy Communications Director. When you go out onto a show or out in front of the public and you're going to answer questions, and the president has been in the hospital because he had COVID, the idea that they're not going to ask you when was the last test he had that he was negative is impossible to imagine. If you work in that White House, you walk out with that information armed. Here's Aaron Burnett asking him this question.
The president started feeling symptoms, we are told that was Thursday, right? So that means he was almost certainly infected on Tuesday when he went to the debate because of the time the CDC has told us it takes between infection and the onset of symptoms. So can you categorically, Brian, say he tested negative on the day of the debate?
I don't have that. I have what I think everyone knows now, that what we've put together in terms of timeline, which is that we know that Hope had tested positive on Thursday. At some point later, the president had that confirmatory test, which he announced to the nation very late at night then. Yep. And so that's the information that we have. But the president had not been obviously showing any symptoms or anything like that. And
first off, Jamie, if I take a confirmatory test, what does that imply?
A test to confirm something?
Right. Well, to confirm maybe a prior test. That seems a little bit weird to me, but I think maybe he took an earlier test on Thursday. But that's something that we don't have? What? Does anybody believe that? Is there anybody in the country who believes that they don't have the information about whether Donald Trump tested positive or negative on that day, or the information that whether he took a test? How is it possible that the White House communications director goes out and doesn't have that information? I mean, one of two things is the case. He didn't take tests on a daily basis, and that's why. And they also came late and didn't take, apparently ABC was it ABC or whatever Cleveland was going to the Cleveland hospital was going to test, and they showed up too late for those tests. So either he didn't take a test on that day and lied, at least by implication, I mean, or they don't test him daily, or he knew that he was positive and he went there anyway. Or maybe anyway is the wrong way to phrase it. I mean, if Donald Trump thinks like, I tested positive, okay, I got it. I'm bringing everybody down with me. I mean,
screw it.
He's jokerfied.
I mean, honestly, like it's one or two of those things. Here is Dr. Jonathan Rayner on with Don Lemon as to the question, is Donald Trump getting daily tested, or was he? Did he get tested prior to the debate? Or did he just go up there and assume like, I don't got it? Or did he know that he was positive? Here's that question on CNN.
Can be infected. I think we've really started to put together the timeline here, and this is what I think it is. First of all, there's no chance the president was tested before the debate. I think that's pretty clear. He was symptomatic on Thursday night, and it takes about a week after infection to get sick enough to be admitted to the hospital. So I think the president was infected with the coronavirus for at least a week before he was admitted to the hospital. That takes him to the end of the prior week, before the super spreader event. The rules of the debate required both sides to list all of their attendees and to document that they've been tested within 72 hours. There's no chance that happened with the president.
Could he be the super spreader here?
I think he is the super spreader. And I think the reason the White House will not have the CDC do a formal, check and review every single case is that they're concerned that the patient zero might be the president of the United States.
Oh my God.
Right? I mean, honestly, like, how do you respond to that? And that's the best case scenario, right? Or I should say, best case scenario. That is the least reprehensible of this possible scenarios. That's pretty reprehensible. They obviously lied about getting tested, right? I mean, they signed a document that says we're going to get tested within 72 hours. Here's the test results. They obviously, they didn't leave it blank. They didn't leave it blank. The even more reprehensible ones, he knew that he was positive and he went. But either way, I mean, are you kidding me? And they're not doing contact tracing? I mean, think about this. There are people who have infected their families because they got infected through this either super spreader event or through patient zero, Donald Trump, patient president, who have infected their families because the White House refuses to allow the CDC to do any type of contact tracing so that people really can be aware and predict whether they should go into quarantine or not, because they don't want it to be revealed how early the president was infected. I mean, it's almost as if like you went into a metaphor factory and said, let's do the perfect metaphor. Let's do the perfect metaphor for how the president has functioned with the American people, and we'll just make it something that people can digest and actually count the number of people that he is willing to risk their lives or their health for his own whatever convenience. I mean, it's nuts. It's nuts.
Capitalism is the disease. Trump is the symptom. Communism is the cure. That's my take on this.
Right, except for, I'm pretty sure avowed, capitalist, shunner of socialism, Joe Biden, wouldn't have handled it this way if he was president. Or frankly, any other. I mean, I don't know about other Republicans, or I just think that party is just, it's impossible to predict the depths of how low they'll go. But I just don't think other people who have a semblance, even if they think that the solution to everything is the market, would actually do something like this. I don't think this is a.
On the other hand, the Mont Pelerin Society, John Tyler, the head of it, endorsed Trump, so they're still at it.
I wasn't trying to do an exact metaphor, but thanks for ruining my catchy slogan.
Well, no sloganeering, I thought was, let's pull this up. I got good news for you folks. The president feels great. You don't have to worry about the president because just because he had COVID, you saw him the other night. He's taking those deep, deep breaths, just enjoying the clean air in Washington, D.C. Just out there, and he's feeling great. How do I know it? Because there's a letter that says he's feeling great. Put this up on the screen. He's feeling great. We don't need to see him. We don't need any proof. Do we have a picture of him with a? Are we going to need a picture of the president with today's newspaper? This is a memorandum for Kylie McEnany. Oh gosh, this is personal information. Are we allowed to see this? Are we allowed to see this?
We might get demonetized.
Well, I don't want to read anybody's personal memos, because this is for Kayleigh McEnany, who's the assistant to the president and the White House press secretary. Now, of course, is she available? Because she has it too, right? Isn't she quarantining?
Yes.
This is from Sean Conley, the physician to the president, Commander U.S. Navy. In other words, he is in the chain of command. He is talking not just about his patient, but his boss, his military superior. Which I say that because how do you get a doctor to come out there and answer the question, has the president ever been on supplemental oxygen? And he says he is not on supplemental oxygen today. That's correct. Right. No, sir. We're asking you, has he ever been on it? Like I say, not taking oxygen today or even yesterday. That's correct. So the good doctor says, I released the following information with the permission of the president, Donald J. Trump. There's no briefing from the president doctors today. The president this morning says, quote, I feel great. Are we? Is there a briefing that we're going to be getting from the president on this, or is it? I'm going to tell everybody. I feel great. It's physical exam.
I've heard that one before.
Yeah, exactly. Physical exam and vital signs, including oxygen saturation and respiratory rate, all remain stable and in normal range. Do you think if his oxygen saturation rate was like 99%, do you think they'd put that up there? Oh, I want to continue to read this. This is good stuff. This is good stuff. You think they put it up if it was 99% or 98%? Like normal range for what? For a guy with COVID or for somebody without COVID? He's now been fever-free for more than 4 days, symptom-free for over 24 hours. All right. And has not needed nor received any supplemental oxygen since initial hospitalization. So indeed, he did. They do now concede that. Of note today, the president's demonstrated detectable levels of SARS-CoV-2 antibodies from labs drawn Monday, October 5th. Initial GC levels drawn late Thursday night were undetectable. We'll continue to closely monitor, and I will update you as I know more. Well,
which means he was certainly infected during the debate because it takes a week to 3 weeks to develop antibodies.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
At least when Hillary was trying to pretend she felt great, she had the balls to say it herself.
Exactly.
To the camera.
I think when you have to have your doctor say you feel great, that may be a little bit of clue that you don't necessarily feel so great. Right? I mean, if you felt really great, you'd probably be like, bring the cameras in. I feel great.
I feel great.
Unbelievable.
He's going to die, guys. I feel this in my bones.
Well, eventually we all die.
No, he's going to die soon of
before
COVID.
The election.
I don't know if it's going to be before or after because it could take like a month and the election's pretty soon, but I feel it. We're going to get this one. Like there is going to be at some point a really expensive treatment that brings the survival rate for rich people up to 100%. We don't have that yet. So many bad things have happened this year. Something good has to. And I really think, did you guys watch that video? He's a dying old man.
I'm getting like an incredible deja vu from this. It's weird. Honestly.
From the last time I wished death on a fascist.
Well, you're not wishing death. Let's be clear. You're simply...
No, I'm predicting death.
You're predicting. I mean, it's not an irrational prediction. I mean, he's in a cohort that could die. But it could be that they indeed have found at least a thing that greatly diminishes COVID, and it's available to the president, period.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of old people in his sort of state do get it and don't get super, super, super sick. I mean, a lot have. 200,000 plus people have died, but it's not the case that if you get it, you're dead, right?
No, but he is 74 years old. He is obese. He eats a steady diet of McDonald's. He has a number of risk factors. And that's my prediction. That's all I'm going to say about it for now, because I don't want to sound too happy. But yes, I do.
All right. Well, that's we could start a pool.
He's 10 years older than Bolsonaro. So, Bolsonaro was more likely to survive it. He's way older than Boris Johnson, who is like way, way younger than I thought he was.
I think we need to wait like another day or two, but that's a bold prediction. If I'll tell you what. What's that?
Madam Secretary, how are you feeling? Great. I'm feeling great. What happened?
There it is. There's Hillary Clinton saying, I'm feeling great. We didn't get that same thing from Donald Trump.
No, he did some funny tweets, though. I was told by someone who knows the doctor that the steroid they put him on is a thing that will make you carry your own coffin to your grave.
That's pretty good.
Well,
it really painted a good picture for me.
We shall see. Look, I'm going to say this. Q works in mysterious ways. And so we really can't know. We really can't know. Let's get this out of the way here. Here is Brit Hume. And look, I mean, if I was Joe Biden at this point and Donald Trump wanted to debate me, I'd be like, no effing way. Dude, you lied last time. You either lied that you were tested and you came without having been tested with an entourage that clearly hadn't been tested, or you worse than lied and tried to basically get me sick from COVID. But
and your performance was completely inappropriate too.
Right. And also it's like, it was a total waste. Here's Brit Hume. Like, you're not going to get a second bite at that apple. I would, I mean, does anybody feel like they would miss out if there wasn't a second debate? But here's Brit Hume. Is Brit Hume still working?
I think he's like emeritus status at this
Emeritus?
point, basically.
He's a horrible human being, I think, Brit Hume. But I don't know him personally. I'm talking in terms of like his public pronouncements, of course. Here's Brit Hume on with Martha McCallum explaining how Joe Biden owes it to the country to allow this the super spreader to get near him.
This is, I do want to play this. It just came in, Britt. This is Joe Biden on the tarmac just a short time ago being asked about the second debate. Let's watch this.
They're going to be, and I'm not sure that what President Trump is all about now. I don't know what his status is. I'm looking forward to being able to debate him, but I just hope all the protocols are followed, which is necessary at the time.
Do you feel safe in the same room as somebody who still may have COVID?
Well, I think if he still has COVID, we shouldn't have a debate.
So he was asked that question, and that's how he responded, opening the door to potentially not having a debate if he thinks that it's within that time frame that's dangerous, Brett.
Well, look, haven't the medical authorities been telling us all this time that to avoid infection, you stay a certain distance apart and you wear masks, and then even in certain circumstances, you might have a partition.
I just want people to just take a breath right now and just contemplate where this guy is going with this. He's making it like, haven't the so-called authorities told us that, like, if you do this, you will catch COVID? You know, one of the things that the authorities start out with is like, don't go into a space with someone you know who has COVID. That would be like the baseline. You don't even need to be a doctor to get that if you know someone has COVID, don't go near them unless you are a trained professional in a suit to give them life support in some fashion. But he's going to pretend like we just keep hearing from all these like fancy egghead doctors that you can be safe if you wear a mask. This is just like, the idea that this guy can go on television. If this is where he's going with it, continue.
That separates you from others. And that way you can get on with life. There's a real need in this country to get on with life. And presidential and vice presidential debates are a part of that. So the idea that if the president is still potentially infected in some way, that you couldn't stage an in-person debate, I think flies on the face of all that we've been told about this disease. Now, if we're now to believe that all the precautionary measures that we've talked about, that people that are carrying the virus can transmit it despite distancing and despite masks and other precautionary measures, then we're in a whole new ballgame. I don't think we are.
No, we're not. I mean, this is just, it's like, how much money do you have to get before you go on television and say something like that? The reason why we take these precautions is because we don't know. They're reasonable precautions to take in the slight chance that someone around us might have COVID. But if you know they have COVID, they need to be quarantining. They need to be kept away from people. And then he's like infected in some way. There's only one way you're infected with COVID. That's if you're infected with COVID.
I do want to see that debate, though.
Put him in his own room. Put him in his own room. Put him in his own like little booth.
They could do it over Zoom.
They should do it over Zoom. But I mean, honestly, what's the dollar figure, Jamie, that you would get to go on Fox to say something like that?
I just wouldn't.
$2.5 billion. What if you could disavow it afterwards?
Oh man.
Just for that one spot.
Yeah, I mean, maybe if I could use it to then turn around and fund a revolution immediately.
$65 million to go on it. I don't know. It's just like how decrepit of a human being do you have to be to go on and say that? You know what I want? I want Brit Hume. I want Brit Hume to be standing in between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. How's that? You can wear your mask, Brit. You can wear your mask.
Biden's still wearing a mask like a cuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brit Hume should moderate, and Dan Bongino should be the Secret Service member who drives Trump around. I don't know why that offer hasn't been made yet. I don't know if Dan isn't a patriot enough, or if maybe his credentials, there's some reports.
Clearances need to be renewed, but I'm sure we can expedite that process for him. Let's get a
he should be driving Trump
around. Just to give you a sense of how toxic Donald Trump is now to the Republican senators. I mean, there's
literally.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. The metaphor has now become the literal truth.
These are literal times.
Here is Martha McSally running in Arizona. After the impeachment vote. The impeachment vote really forced a lot of people into a box because you really had no other direction in which to go to. You remember after the impeachment vote, I think it was, McSally, had to basically, she had to make her choice. I'm headed down this path. And then she did that whole thing with where she yelled at the CNN reporter, like, you're part of the liberal media. I'm not going to answer your question or something. That made a big show of it. Well, she is getting pounded in the polls now. And if you want to know what a politically drowning person looks like, and a moderator is throwing them an anvil and they are trying to push the anvil away, watch this clip of Martha McSally not answering the question, do you support Donald Trump, in the Arizona debate last night?
Senator, the question was, are you proud of your support for President Trump?
I'm proud to be fighting for Arizona every single day.
Is that a yes or a no for President Trump?
Putting legislation on President Trump's desk.
So you're proud of your support for President Trump?
You look at the legislation we put on his desk, it's to cut Arizona taxes.
It sounds like she is proud of her support for President Trump.
I'm proud to be fighting for Arizona. The question is, why was he wanting to support Bernie Sanders?
Regarding President Trump, your overall impression of his behavior and his actions in office. Your opponent just basically said she's proud of her support.
There you go. She would not answer it. And so the moderator was like, I'm going to take that as a yes, unless you have a complaint. I like that tactic.
That's good.
I've asked you the question 3 times. you're answering me and I need to discern it. And so I'm going to discern it in this manner. And if you got a problem with that, you can just say it. If not, I'm going to characterize it in this way. I like that moderating technique. She cannot say it, and she cannot not say it. The bed has been made, as it were. And this is a problem that Republican senators are going to have across the board. Lindsey Graham really could lose this race in South Carolina. That's pretty stunning. And I think, his, it is a reminder, McSally was not elected. She was just appointed. And they did it in such a way that she could get those 2 years in, I guess, after McCain died, as opposed to like actually holding an election in a timely fashion. But she's done. She is cooked.
Uh-huh.
Here is, this was on Sunday. And we know now that there are two members of the Senate Judiciary Committee have coronavirus. I have not heard of how many reports there are of negative tests for other people at the super spreader event. Apparently, Bill Barr has tested negative 5 times. I haven't heard. Have you heard of like Josh Hawley or any of those others?
I know some of them refused to get tested.
Yeah, that seems unlikely, right? Or is it? I don't know.
I read about at least one.
That
Maybe
seems
it was
very suspicious to me. Like, why would you refuse to get tested?
It might have been Mike Pompeo. I'm going to look it up.
Chris Christie's status is still unknown right now, but he's still in the hospital.
Well, I'm thinking more on the Judiciary Committee because Here is Tom Cotton trying in some way to equate. John McCain came in. He was pretty ill when he came in to vote thumbs down. I think Ted Kennedy voted while he had when he was in the end stages of his brain cancer. There is plenty of times in history where senators have been, helped into the chamber to vote because they have an illness. They need help. There is a slight difference in this instance. And here's Tom Cotton trying to make the case, but see if you are clever enough to figure out what might be different from someone who has cancer or some other type of ailment that makes it hard for them to get into the chamber versus what we're facing right now.
A week from tomorrow, Maria. And then on the Senate floor later this month, first off, I think every senator who's currently tested positive or is in isolation will be back to work under normal conditions, as other senators have been as well, like Rand Paul or Tim Kaine. But if that's not the case, Maria, there is a long and venerable tradition of ill or medically infirm senators being wheeled in to cast critical votes on the Senate floor. Most recently, Robert Byrd in 2009 repeatedly rolled in a wheelchair just months before his death to vote for Obamacare. So I'm confident that every senator will be in attendance when his or her vote is needed.
So what are you expecting from these?
Now, if I remember correctly, Robert Byrd did not have an infectious disease that was highly contagious. That might have been one of the factors. They probably said, okay, can we get Byrd in there and and make it in such a way that it's safe for him and it's not going to cause him too much discomfort and it's not going to decrease his life in any fashion, or to the extent that it's a decision he might want to make. One of the questions they have is like, is his ailments, is it possible that he could infect other people? Like the guy in the door and holding the door open, or the elevator operator, or the driver of the car, or other senators. I mean, come on. They are still pretending this doesn't exist. It's nuts.
Do you think, Sam, that the Democratic senators are going to take this golden opportunity to not show up to give them a quorum?
My guess would be sadly no, but I'm I hope I'm mistaken. Like the idea that they would in any way help with quorum in this instance is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Make every one of those Republican senators show up in Washington, D.C. to provide a quorum. I mean, you're going to be able to go out and you're going to be able to campaign. Make them all show up to provide quorum.
Like, even without the deadly virus, it would be a fine thing to do to block this Supreme Court nominee, but I'm not going to hold my breath.
It's not going to block. They can't block it. They just don't have the ability to block it, but they can slow it down without a doubt. And the way they'll justify not doing that is like, well, we can't stop. It's inevitable anyways, which it is for the most part. I mean, Mitch McConnell is going to make this happen, but they could make it more inconvenient and make the Republicans pay a political price in terms of their not being able to go out on the campaign trail. And it's either going to work or it's not going to work. I mean, the Republicans will be out there like, Democrats shirking their responsibilities. They're not doing their job. They're also doing just horrible messaging on Amy Coney Barrett as it is. I mean, this is why, though, I think the Republicans have been so excited about her, because she is hard to attack on the sort of the typical grounds, right? Like, how do you talk about the fact that she was part of like this very small, very fundamentalist religious sect that involved her maybe meeting her husband while they were both living in the house of the head of the sect?
That's so creepy.
And it, that's where they were trained when she was a handmaid. That is not my term. That is their term.
Oh my God.
Yes. When she was trained as a handmaid, that's when supposedly around the time where she met her husband, who was also living in that house. Now, outside of this context, if you were to tell me that there's a guy and his wife and they have a house and they invite college students and law students into their house and match them up with with their mates, essentially, I would say to you, hey, that sounds like a weird cult. That sounds like something's very odd going on there. And then I'd probably say, well, as long as it's, doesn't harm anybody, live and let live. It's not like they're imposing their worldview on the rest of us. Not like they're going to be a vote on the Supreme Court for 40 years to come. And but it turns out it is going to be like that.
Well, seems like you could talk about it. I mean, she's on the record saying she wants to overturn Roe versus Wade. That should be a talking point.
Oh, it is. I think we're gonna hear that. But
and by the way, it was Chuck Grassley who won't get tested.
Wow, that's weird. That's weird. You'd think he'd want
assume Grassley positive in his dumb tweet stuff.
I mean, look. I saw a video the other day of some chuds saying they don't even believe that Trump has it. So they might be working with their own set of facts.
Yep. Here's speaking of working with their own set of facts. Here is Tucker Carlson retelling the events of the past, 5 or 6 days, and leaving out some of the context when it comes to the treatment that Donald Trump got.
Some of his aides suggested in background that he could die from it. The media happily seconded that diagnosis. Trump, they informed us, has a condition known as clinical obesity. Obesity? Whatever. It sounded significantly worse than cancer and far more unattractive. So for a time, it looked like curtains for Big Orange. And then an amazing reversal. Trump strode out of the hospital, thumbs in the air, back from the grave, tweeting like a savage. Today, he was at his desk in the White House. New Yorker subscribers may never get over the shock of it all. To add to their pain and confusion and bewilderment, Donald Trump released this video last night.
I learned so much about coronavirus. And one thing that's for certain, don't let it dominate you. Don't be afraid of it. You're going to beat it. We have the best medical equipment. We have the best medicines. Don't let it dominate. Don't let it take over your lives. Don't let that happen. We have the greatest country in the world.
Feeling really good, the president tweeted later. Don't be afraid of COVID. Don't let it dominate your life. We have developed, under the Trump administration, some really great drugs and knowledge, end quote. Well, it was self-promotional, of course. But honestly, it's hard to think of a better or more positive message. Take Trump out of it. Yes, the coronavirus is obviously deadly. It's killed hundreds of thousands of people in this country, most of them old and sick. But the president himself is old, not to mention clinically obese, whatever that is. And yet he survived. He appears to be in a great mood, as people who cheat death often are.
He's
of course,
on drugs.
He received great medical care. He's the president. But there was no magic involved in the treatment he received. Every drug Donald Trump took is available to the rest of us if and when we get sick. And that ought to give us hope. Trump survived, so can we. It doesn't mean we should ignore the coronavirus or behave
Pause it for 1 second. Pause it. Hold it. Regeneron is not he was on an experimental drug that was in stage 3 trials. That is not available to everyone. The top hospital in the country is not available to everyone. If you get COVID, there's not going to be 8 doctors who are going to be surrounding you, walking around all with, their own individual reports. These are all just lies. These are all just lies that Tucker is perpetrating on his, his audience, who he obviously thinks are idiots and morons. Continue.
But it does suggest we don't have to live in a permanent state of terror. Don't let it dominate your life, Trump said. That's advice you'd give your own children.
Yeah, I mean, let's not let it dominate our advice. Did you have that? This guy, he is, I guess maybe he's not. He's just up near Augusta, Maine. He's up near the White Mountains in Maine, is what the reports are. What's that thing? I guess he was mad about this too, right? That they had written his Maine studio almost ready. This is in May. It's up in Woodstock or something. I don't know where it is, but we don't need to put any more up there. But that's basically the story. There's the guy who won't let it dominate his life. He's moved up to Maine. Now, granted, it's his vacation home, and he's buying a studio down there. Maybe that's not dominating your life. But the fact of the matter is, everyone's life, who's taking it seriously, is inhibited or changed because of this. Wonder where his kids are. His kids going to school up there? Or what are they doing? Come on. God. Just
put your money where your mouth is, Tucker.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, Trump's video just now where he was talking about don't let COVID dominate your life, don't get cucked. That's going to be in a museum someday after we've abolished gender in an exhibit centered around toxic masculinity. It's just the apotheosis of this.
No kidding. I hope they put it on his screen, ultimately. Over his headstone.
Just playing on a loop.
So the right is still trying to spin this this tweet by Donald Trump. We talked about it at the beginning of the show. Donald Trump tweets out he has instructed Mnuchin to stop negotiating on any type of economic relief, as a function of the pandemic. And then a couple hours later, people were like, you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to admit publicly that you're the one who is closing down the conversation on this. You're supposed to pretend that Pelosi's ruined it and negotiating in bad faith and blah, blah, blah. You're not supposed to admit that you're the one who's actually doesn't want to negotiate because you have no agenda And so he came out later with like, oh, everybody should get a check. Here is Brian Kilmeade just like asking essentially Mark Meadows, dude, don't you have anybody who's like watching him?
No, when you come out in business hours and with the tweet the president came out with, it tanked the market. I think it lost 400 points. And this an hour before the Fed Chair Jerome Powell says he warned failing to inject more federal help into the economy would risk weakening the tenuous recovery. Country needs stimulus checks, many people would say, that you want to give. Having said that, being that the Fed's saying that, he's not saying Republicans or Democrats. It's to the president's advantage and the country's need to get something in there. Why can't you work something out, being that Steve Mnuchin had 2 long meetings yesterday? Did he come back, throw up his hands and tell the president, do me a favor and tweet? Did you ask the president to tweet? Could you bring us inside that process?
Well, I'll bring you inside the process. I think I was sharing that we actually had a phone call there. We can continue to have conversations that don't lead anywhere, Brian. And when you do that, we were on with Leader McCarthy, Leader McConnell, the president, myself, and as we were talking about the progress there, the numbers they were talking about are just incredibly high in terms of bailouts for states, blue-run states. The numbers they're suggesting are much higher than what the real need is. Additionally, when we look at, there was a bipartisan proposal that put out by the problem solvers. Almost at every turn, the proposal that the president put forth was actually better than that proposal. There comes a point where you understand that the other side is just playing politics. The real thing is Speaker Pelosi didn't want those checks to go out to the American people before November 3rd. She felt like it would help the president, and so she's been negotiating in that manner. Right. And so we're still willing to be engaged, but I'm not optimistic for a comprehensive deal. I am optimistic that there's about 10 things that we could do on a piecemeal basis if the speaker is willing to put it before her members.
Yeah, just to remind you, the question was, ladies and gentlemen, the question was, why did he tweet that out, that he was walking away from negotiations? And Mark Meadows just like, I got to fill the time here. I don't want many more questions about this. We messed up. We messed up big time. Look, it was quite clear the Republicans had no desire to go back into this. This is a failure by Nancy Pelosi dating back to April, where she, basically told even Andrew Cuomo and Jake Tapper at that time knew, like, wait a second, you have no more leverage. You just already gave the Republicans everything they wanted. What makes you think they're going to come back? Don't worry. We're going to get state and municipal funding.
Calm down, honey.
Why is this so important? We already have Moody's downgrading New York City, the bonds. We have states having to cut deep into and lay off tens of thousands of workers. And when states start to contract, this is where you get real pain. And they can't deficit spend. They don't have the ability to print money. The federal government does. So that funding is in dire need. She miscalculated as to how horrible the Republicans were. And the Republicans are such idiots. Donald Trump's White House, it's really Donald Trump is just so out of his mind right now. He doesn't realize that the only play he had was to pretend that it was Nancy Pelosi's fault. And he just announced that he was going to end the conversation. And so Mark Meadows is trying to dig himself out of this. And now they're saying, well, we'll send out a couple of checks. Of course he wants to send out checks. But the fact of the matter is, it's not meaningful. They're gonna try and block everything they can if Joe Biden gets elected. I know I went back and forth with Chris Hayes on this on Twitter a little bit. In my mind, they're going to have to get rid of the filibuster, the Democrats are, if they take control of the Senate and the House, to get any legislation passed that would provide aid for people. He thinks it's going to be through a reconciliation process, which is also, I guess, possible. But it's complicated. And so you're not going to see anything go out the door until February 1 at the earliest. That's if everything goes well. it's probably going to be more like March 1st that people are going to start to see any type of relief. I mean, that's 6 months away.
Well, according to his more recent tweets, he's ready to send us the $1,200 checks right now.
I mean, he might be the only. I don't know. I don't know if I would do that if I was Pelosi at this point. I mean, I guess like she's in a tough position by her own making because they gave away all the leverage when they basically said the Fed is going to provide free money for corporations. That was it.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And if people, I mean, not that the votes really are going to matter that much at this point if they refuse to count the ballots, but people might be more likely to vote for Trump if he gave them $1,200 and the Democrats gave them nothing, regardless of the reason behind that.
Yep. Without a doubt. Also, we are looking at across the country, different dates in different places. But we are looking at a mass eviction crisis, among other crises. Here's AOC on MSNBC last night making that case.
And we're already starting to see warning signs of the severe economic and health fallout that is to come. We are on the brink of an eviction crisis, a mass eviction crisis here in our district, but also across the country. 30 to 40 million people are at risk of being evicted because the president has decided to walk away from every working person in this country. Now, that's before we even get to mortgages. It's before we get to unemployment extension. It's before we get to a second stimulus check. In addition, just as we're entering the fall, we are at risk of a second spike. And what we are seeing here in New York City, which is a city that has some of the strictest COVID guidelines and some of the highest rates of mask wearing adherence in the country, we are still starting to experience areas where there's kind of a second spike. 9 zip codes in New York City are at risk of being shut down totally or partially due to a secondary fall wave. Now, if we decide, and if the president and the GOP follow through with walking away from COVID relief, we are staring down the barrel at one of the largest mass eviction crises in the history of this country since the Great Depression. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at a potential second wave that could be catastrophic. We are looking at the potential of hunger in the United States exploding on a level that we have never seen since the Great Depression. And all of it is preventable. All of it. All we need to do is authorize a second stimulus check. We need to make sure that we get state and local funding so that municipal governments can stay above water at least through the end of the year. We need to make sure that we are funding large-scale testing and tracing programs. And we need to make sure that we're really developing a vaccine responsibly and not pushing one out for the sake of an election.
I mean, there you have it. I mean, the Pared Down Heroes Act is in some respect what she's talking about. It's really just a shorter timeline.
Yeah. I mean, obviously she's correct about the legislative measures that need to be taken. I would only add that, people don't have to wait around for this to happen, right? We can look back to the early 1900s, the tenants' rights movement, right? Like people would get evicted from their tenement apartments and then these tenants protection groups would move them back in and they would form a hard picket and they would keep the landlord from kicking them out. And that is something that we're seeing starting to happen again. Yep. And you know what? The more people band together and exert their power, the less the landlords are going to be inclined to fight them. I mean, some definitely will no matter what. But maybe some of them would use their immense political power to say, hey, you got to give people money because they're not paying the rent and we're going to get foreclosed on.
Yep.
That's the only acceptable thing for landlords to do. I think, community organization against evictions over the next few months is going to be very important. If landlords are upset about that, they should contact their representative.
Let's take some IMs. Kowalski. Hey, Sam et al. I cannot understate how much I disavow radical evangelicals. I would like to ask a favor. Could you do a day where you take a bunch of 30-second calls so we can hear more people, causes, and about candidates? You did this about a year ago. It was rather fun. Yeah, I'll do that. Depressant. I turned 38 today. Any advice, Sam? Wear a mask. I don't think I got anything else. Have fun. Zopunny. Every time I read about Obama doing something to stop the movement, like the NBA a few weeks ago, I hear Michael in my head, Obama saying, fuck him. Yeah. Amy McGrath ads, thoughts? I couldn't even bother watching them, frankly, to be honest with you. Like, I just it was so upset. She's going to lose. All that money is going to be wasted. It's not going to build, even worse than that, like worse than losing is losing and having nothing to show for it.
Well, apparently it's worse than that because some of those ads are running in Ohio as well on the other side of the Cincinnati suburbs.
And they're basically making fun of Mitch McConnell for not supporting Donald Trump enough, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if Booker, it's Charles Booker, right?
Yep. Yes.
If Booker would have won, I think the odds were stacked against him. But what he would have done was actually develop the beginnings of a movement and some cohesive. Like what she's doing is it's just honestly, like it's not only like taking a bunch of money and burning it in the backyard. It's like taking a bunch of money and burning it in the backyard really close, dangerously close to your house.
Or burning it in a hot air balloon that just sails off and is labeled movement to some other place.
I mean, look, I'm not from Kentucky, but I've talked to the Trillbillies about this a little bit, and they tell me there are no centrist liberals in Kentucky for the most part. There are conservatives, and there are people who are pretty leftist, and Amy McGrath is not going to be building the left in any way, shape, or form. She has no constituency there.
Yeah, this is really on Democratic Party leadership.
I mean, they supported her. I mean, but she should have. I mean, if there was no centrist liberals there, then she wouldn't have won the.
I'm sure there are some with an inordinate amount of power within the state's Democratic Party.
Yeah. I mean, Booker's, he is fairly well placed in state politics there, I think, for a Democrat. Isn't he like
which is why McGrath is so like galling and why like Schumer and it's infuriating.
I mean, it's
not like he's Cory Bush.
It is I think they're nervous. I think they were nervous about him winning, to be honest with you. I really do. Or just they're just incredibly incompetent. It could be both, but I don't know. Ban Don Gino. WFP in Philly managed to get a supermajority with Democrats on the city council because of party seat caps. Yes. Jamie Specs. I had a long convo with Nomiki Konst about the WFP. You should as well. It's far more interesting than the pronunciation of her name. Sam, we just need to call Donald Trump what he is, a biological weapon of mass destruction. Yeah, I mean, a take on the WFP, particularly in New York, is, it's nuanced. There's some things that are really bad. There's some things that are really good. I mean, but I think net, it's positive in my mind. Penny from New Mexico. I've heard he arrived too late to the debate to get tested and all went forward on good faith. Makes us wonder if he knew he was positive. Yes, indeed. Ankry recently became a member. You guys are doing a great job. It's my birthday. How about a shofar? You got it. Panda. Trump and company knowingly brought COVID to Cleveland in hopes of infecting as many of the Biden camp as possible. It's hard to know. NJ Connor, did you watch any of the Arizona debate last night? Hope you have a clip or two to share the pain. Did. I'm in Arizona, says Shelby. I'd like to thank Martha McSally for making it possible for Arizona to have 2 Democratic senators. She's on track to lose both within 2 years. It's true. Trump change. wishing that the White House support staff would go on strike until January. Run PMC, ProPublica, is reporting out Bill Barr's DOJ has changed voting investigation policy. It now allows prosecutors to take steps that could interfere with elections. Is that right? We got to look into that. Zephi, New York working families parties tried to back Nixon during the governor's race, and Cuomo pressured all the unions to pull their support. Indeed. Anarcho-Bidenist. Hey, Sam, worth bringing up that the EU's climate policy is that there's already a lot of cheating going on with those numbers, basically offloading emissions on poorer countries, by example, by importing soy for animal feed, stuff like that. I mean, I have no doubt that this stuff is leaky. That's just the nature of, but setting lower numbers is good. Bear at home, me too. Two, rather. Sam, I love your libertarian debates. It's actually how I found the show about 5 years ago. I would request a change until after the election. I think libertarians should be voting third party. Also, I'm slightly disappointed that you don't approach the far left with the same level of scrutiny. Well, I mean, the primary reason why I don't. I mean, I don't know who you're referring to specifically, but when you reach libertarianism, it's wretched. The route to libertarianism is probably more wretched than actually getting to libertarianism, which is also wretched. I have a lot of skepticism in terms of the far, far left, right? I mean, Jamie and I have talked about this. But most of the places you go en route there are good in my estimation. Most of those goals down the highway, as it were. Now, I don't know that you can reach the end of the highway, and I have sometimes issue with some tactics that are taken on that road down the highway, but every one of those exit ramps, those rest stops, wherever we end up, in my estimation, is better than where we are now. That's basically it.
Yeah, don't fall asleep in the back of the car and whoops, you wake up in full communism.
I think the frame is kind of wrong. Like, we take issues with parts of the left we find, objectionable, like Jimmy Dore, for instance. I mean, you could argue that he shouldn't really be put on the left, but I think nominally he is, right? So
I would not call him a member of the far left, no.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, what is the far left? Like, is it Stalin?
I would call it the anti-capitalist left, I think.
Yeah, but what beef do we have with them?
I don't think. I perceive myself as anti-capitalist. I just
right.
But
what?
In my estimation, I don't think you need to be for the complete. I mean,
anti-capitalism is a broad thing.
I'm looking for a mixed economy, and
I mean, I would define anti-capitalism as like you don't have capitalists determining economic priorities for society.
I don't know. I mean, maybe this is a dumb argument to get into, but I think it means something pretty specific. And there's a range of tendencies within it, but it means we have to abolish the wage system and abolish markets.
Oh, all right.
I don't think that's true at all.
Sounds like anti-market.
Certainly. Okay, markets. I guess there's some market socialists out there, democratic socialists. Some of them think there's a place for markets. But the primary things that got to go are wage labor and private property. And I think those things are pretty clear. Capitalism
is not the only system that has private property, is it?
Yeah, I mean, I think private property defined in distinction to personal property. I definitely think that all private property should be under some sort of social control, ultimately.
Yeah, the way we define private property, because I think there's a little bit of confusion between people on what we mean when we say, the idea, your house right? If you're only living in it, that's not private property, that's personal property. If you're renting out rooms in your house and making passive income off of it, then that becomes private property. Similarly, if a boss owns the means of production that the workers are using to create things and then they're exploiting them for their labor, that's private property. That's what we mean when we talk about private property.
So no wages in the context of a co-op.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we get into some dicey territory because I didn't listen to your interview with Richard Wolff yesterday, but I'm going to. He's like co-op world is kind of his socialist horizon. I guess there's a fine line
would
between.
You say that Richard Wolff is not anti-capitalist?
There's a fine line between democratic socialism and social democracy, right? I think it's a version of socialism. I guess the line gets kind of blurry when we're talking about, oh well, there'll still be markets, but there won't be wage labor, or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, for the sake of this,
I don't think that I'm pro-capitalist.
I feel like I would say you're a social democrat, right? You favor a mixed economy, nationalizing of various industries, decommodification of certain necessities, but still keep a market in place for some things. And wage labor, probably you're not trying to get rid of people working for bosses, right?
But like I'm just saying a lot, like with respect to the this isn't stuff we have beef with, right? I don't know. It's an academic debate, maybe. But
I mean, my issues with Jimmy Dore are less ideological. I mean, although I I'm not even sure I know how to characterize his ideology, and more just sort of like tactical and ethical. Where he is on the political spectrum may change my perspective on how much I should pay attention to him and what kind of damage he's doing. But my issue with him is not that, he wants to go too far in, I don't know, nationalizing. I mean, I don't know. I've never even heard him talk about that.
Sam dunks on Richard Wolff for saying we should nationalize telecom.
Yeah, no. I mean, that I see like, I think it is impossible to have I do not believe that in ridding the existence of capitalism, that it's necessary or even effective, like that it's possible to achieve wiping out all the things that you're talking about. The idea of wages and this and that. Now, I'm not even convinced that they're necessarily bad. I would like to have a lot less dependency on wages in our society, where I would like to have society provide for a lot more than it does now, ranging from healthcare to childcare to housing to, the basic services, frankly, so that wages are far less relevant than they are now. But I just think that, like human nature, there are going to be people in our society who are going to, seek power. And they're going to do it through various mechanisms. And I just don't think, for me, like having a mixed economy, and that mixture is going to ebb and flow in different directions because that's inevitable with history. But having a mixed economy maintains some measure of stability. It begins to, it provides a certain tension. I just think that philosophically, I think that tension is possible. I don't think it's impossible. I think it's impossible to not have it. Let's put it that way. And it's just a question of what the dynamic is going to be. I don't think that it is possible to eliminate, the impetus to control other people. And
a practical example of something you might not want to, bring under state control is the media, for instance. And like, I don't know how you incentivize all these things, but I think fundamentally, like decommodifying the essentials, like you outlined, is step one, and then we can talk about how we're going to incentivize action beyond that afterward.
Right.
Yeah. I think I really pecked up my explanation just now, and I'm sorry, but one line I think that is a hard line between maybe democratic socialism and social democracy is, are people working for a boss? Are people, having their labor power exploited? Or, are they, even in a co-op world, they would be working for themselves and sharing the profits, even if I think we need to go further than that. But you know what? I'm fine with having you be an anti-capitalist. I feel like I'm dividing the left right now.
I just think that I think that term is just not specific enough to be, I think the idea is that, I have a critique of capitalism. If that puts me as an anti-capitalist, I have no problem with that.
I mean, you live like a capitalist every day, Sam. So.
Well, we all do, don't we?
Nope.
No.
Well,
I mean,
Antifada's
if we're talking about
a co-op.
Owning the means of production and having other people work for you, I don't have anyone working for me.
Well, I guess that's true. I guess to a certain extent, that is the case. I don't have any equipment, or I'm not exploiting anything that you don't have access to.
I mean, it's by definition what capitalism is, right? That's like the most important part. People, workers, work for a boss. The boss pays them a wage that is less than the amount of value that they're generating for them.
I'm not 100% sure of that. Can you really say that? I don't know if that's true. I guess.
If you're a good capitalist.
Well, part of what I do on this show, frankly, is like, I have another agenda. If I wanted to maximize my profits here, we would have a smaller staff, without a doubt.
Yeah, there's the ideology and value of capitalism, and there's the activity of buying, investing in a private business. Different.
I wasn't talking about capitalists as ideological. I was talking about capitalists as in the ones who own the businesses.
The material relations.
If capitalism is specifically like you only have people working on a project where you get increased profit from, I can assure you, I could point to you right now in this endeavor, including the AM Quickie, where that is not the case.
Well, it's not. That's why I defined it early in the conversation as the capitalist determines the economic priorities because they are the owners.
Yeah, whether they're losing money or making money.
Yeah.
Well, but the point is, in terms of that relationship with labor, like I have a project here that part of it involves profit, but part of it doesn't. And so it's not necessarily that everybody's.
But it's not the profit; it's the ownership.
Yeah, you could still
determining
be
the priorities.
A capitalist if you are making decisions that would be considered bad within a capitalist marketplace that don't make you as many profits.
Well, I'm just going by your definition, and you said it's like I have people working for me, and I'm exploiting their labor because I'm making more money off of their work than I'm generating, and that's just simply not the case. With this,
that part. Not a given. Anyway, it's.
But don't you
probably
own the Antifada?
Yeah, I own it collectively with the other two people.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, but if you were own it yourself, it would be a different situation.
If I had people working for me, yeah, I'd be a capitalist.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I'm a capitalist in that respect.
So am I with literary hangover, to be honest.
You're one of the good ones.
My PC is my mill on the river, actually.
Someday, when we expropriate all the bosses, you'll be all right. Don't worry.
Well,
a lot of people on the far left, quote unquote, watch this show and they like you.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you, folks. Thank you. I've protected myself when we get lined up against the wall. Go to the debate next week in Darth Vader power suit to tell Biden that Joe is his Hunter's father. Simple socialist. Sam, if you thought that human nature is to pursue control over others, why would you simultaneously believe that giving a single person the opportunity to have the economic power over others through private property being reasonable Wouldn't it make more sense to decentralize that power to limit the influence of those people? Well, first of all, yes. First of all, I don't think that human nature is. I'm saying that it's always going to exist within humanity. So I'm not saying it's necessarily every human. I think to the contrary, it's not. But yes, I do think it makes sense to decentralize that power to limit the influence of those people. But at the same time, I don't want to totally decentralize it to the point where there is no structure whatsoever, because you're not getting anything done in a country of 300 million people. And so you're making my point, which is that there's going to be some tension. There has to be. And the question is, you find that balance. And how I define where that balance is optimal is by looking at a situation where the greatest number of people are enjoying the least amount of suffering and the most amount of support possible by that society. That's the algorithm that I would use. But yes, I agree. It does make sense to decentralize the power, particularly in this situation, but not so much so that there is no centralization of power.
Yeah. So I think some things can be centralized and some things can be decentralized. I am not as anarchist as I used to be. I think there's a role for some kind of central planning in our ideal post-capitalist society.
Science people don't care about your feelings. Or is Trump's antibody test detecting the Regeneron antibodies? The company's readout is viral load. Haven't seen how long the 8-gram infusion of antibodies actually persist. Also, that's interesting. I mean, I don't know really how much I understand this, but also, by the way, Regeneron's trials included a cohort of 64 to 84-year-old patients, but they only made up 7% of the trial data to date. The average age was 44 years old. Joyce from PA, he was infused with antibodies. Is that what they measured? Interesting. Rube Davin, I recall a great Ken and Ken moment where they uncovered Hillary claiming on the trail, "I am so sick, so sick. Sam will be the last boss we guillotine." That's basically all I'm looking for. That's going to buy me a lot of time. Bottom structure. Sam, do you believe that the transition from Walter Reed to the White House was driven by a want to mitigate the leaks about the president's health? The White House isn't leak-proof, but it certainly gives the Trump administration more control over access information. No, I think he did that because he wanted to make it look like he wasn't sick. All right, let's do one more clip. This is going to bum a lot of people out. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but all you human secularists out there, ball game is over, according to Dave Rubin. Let's hear.
I mean, we're at the end of secularism, where nothing is moral, nothing is to be judged, nothing is real. You are whatever gender you identify as, you're whatever color you identify as. I mean, these are crazy precepts, especially.
What does this mean? We're at the end of secularism. Does he mean this is where secularism has taken us to this place? Or does he mean like there's no way we can get more secular from here on in? Does anybody know?
I think the former.
All right, well, let's listen.
I wouldn't dare to guess what ideas are flying around in his head.
Incidentally.
Color you.
Okay, go ahead. There we go.
Identify as. I mean, these are crazy precepts, especially by the same people who would tell you that those immutable characteristics are the only things that matter. So at the end of secularism is the chaos that we have right now. And unfortunately, and I do describe this in the book, the liberals have no defense mechanism on this. The liberals, because they don't believe, because in essence, they've decided to believe that logic and reason, meaning their own brains, are the thing that is the highest order of society. Well, then when someone else comes in with feelings of their own, you will always cave to them. And that's why the left seems to always cave to its worst parts. And if you think that Joe Biden is the guy that's going to stand up against it, you got another thing coming.
We're going to have to play that again, because this guy, he's not coherent. But if he's suggesting that there's some issue with all the breakdown of our mores and morals and values in society, because this is where secularism has taken him, I would suggest he literally look in his own backyard. This is a guy who, that secularism that he's calling, these secular values, have led to his ability to have a marriage. I mean, doesn't he realize that he is his whole lifestyle? By that I mean marriage, married life, is only available to him because of that movement that said these religious precepts that you don't have a right to fall in love and to develop a home and to have the same rights, like literal rights in our society and privileges as being married, have all come from everything he just basically said was problematic and dangerous. Play this again.
I mean, we're at the end of secularism, where nothing is moral, nothing is to be judged, nothing is real. You are whatever gender you identify as, you're whatever color you identify as. I mean, these are crazy precepts, especially by the same people.
You know what someone who knows what they're talking about would say? Men marrying men. We've lost all sense of what is right and wrong in this country. That's what, I mean, he's studiously avoiding it because he doesn't want to admit to himself that, like, he's just literally saying, what I am doing should not be legal.
Well, to be fair, it's only a matter of time before Dave Rubin goes to conversion therapy to make his new friends happy.
I mean, but what does he tell his husband?
Like, hey, sorry, I'm not gay anymore. I'm cured. Take a hike, pal.
Can't we just be best friends? Go ahead.
Identify as. I mean, these are crazy precepts, especially by the same people who would tell you that those immutable characteristics are the only things that matter. So at the end of secularism is the chaos that we have right now. And unfortunately, and I do describe this in the book, the liberals have no defense mechanism on this. The liberals, because they don't believe, because in essence, they've decided to believe that logic and reason, meaning their own brains, are the thing that is the highest order of society. Well, then when someone else comes in...
Logic and reason, meaning their own brains, is the highest order of society. Can anybody even take a stab at what that means?
I mean, libertarianism.
Beyond projection.
But I don't even like, so he's saying that logic and reason is their own brain. So he's saying that their own notion of logic and reason is the highest order of society, should dictate. And I guess like that logic and reason would also like involve, when he's talking about the liberals, the right of gay people to marry, right? I mean, does he not, or is he just gonna, like, he's just gonna pretend like the religious moral code that dominated was really just about transgender people. It was never about gay people. We are 15 years out from the last Republican president going on national television in prime time, sadly saying that he's going to have to promote a constitutional amendment to prevent gay people from marrying. And this guy's pretending like that's not an issue of controversy. There was a dissent from the Supreme Court where they rejected a case that came up. I can't remember. I don't have it right in front of me, but Thomas, and I think it was Alito, mentioned Obergefell, which was the case that allowed for gay marriage in this country. He's going to have to revisit this topic in a couple of years, because if he thinks it's settled in the conservative mind that gay people have a right to get married, he's got another thing coming to him. But go ahead.
Order of society. Well, then when someone else comes in with feelings of their own, you will always cave to them. And that's why the left seems to always cave to its worst parts. And if you think that Joe Biden is the guy that's going to stand up against it, you got another thing coming.
I mean, you know.
It seems just like a very bizarre House of Mirrors definition of what like empathy or sympathy might be to Dave Rubin in his mind.
Well, but when he says secularism, right? He's saying that when he's saying secularism, he's basically saying like we've lost our way from religious values.
Mm-hmm.
And the like exhibit A for that is gay marriage. Does he like he thinks this is complete? He just thinks it's completely resolved. Like he just does like
settled matter. Yeah.
I cannot.
They wouldn't do that to Peter Thiel.
Dave might be on something too, because there's this tweet of his this morning.
Let's put this up. Once red-pilled is you suddenly see the lies everywhere and endlessly. It takes an adjustment period for some people that is years. This tweet is pure BS. The decisions are made by governors and mayors, but Biden has media, so can lie endlessly. This is he's responding to Joe Biden. Make no mistake, if you're out of work, if your business is closed, if your child's school is shut down, if you're seeing layoffs in your community, Donald Trump decided today that none of that matters to him. Well, what he's talking about is the failure to provide economic relief to schools, to states, to cities, to individuals. Put that tweet back up. I just want to look at this again. And God knows what time it was. I mean, once red-pilled, so he's red-pilled, you suddenly see the lies everywhere and endlessly. It takes an adjustment period. And for some people, that is years. So in other words, like maybe there's something going on. Maybe if he's bemoaning secular values that led to his ability to get married, I don't know. Maybe there's some trouble in paradise.
He's been making more noise about abortion too. He's continuing that pivot, the world's longest, most obvious pivot.
Maybe he doesn't care about gay marriage anymore because he wants to get out of his marriage.
I've got to check. Well, I mean, that's possible too. I've got to check because I'm quite convinced. I had a tweet a couple of years ago. I was like, in 2 years when I gotta look for that. But there's Dave Rubin, ladies and gentlemen.
Like, sorry, honey, you have to move out. The government said so.
I honestly,
it's not that I want to break up with you.
Right. It's not you. It's not me. It is the prefect has said that we're no longer the values of liberals have lost. So
my hands are tied.
My God. Oh, this is cool. All right, let's play this clip of Reclaim Idaho. Matt had Luke Mayville on TMBS last night. You can check out this interview. And it is a campaign that was pushing for Medicaid expansion in Idaho. This Medicaid expansion, of course, comes from the ACA. Really, in many respects, the best part of the ACA. Well, not even in many respects. I think in all respects. Although changing what we call health insurance is a good thing. But if you can't afford it, you can't afford it. It doesn't matter if it's better. But here is that documentary. When is this film coming out?
They're pitching it to festivals right now, but it's basically going through that process, and then we'll know.
All right, well, let's take a look at this. It's called Reclaim Idaho, and it's about the door knocking that went involved in the Medicaid expansion fight.
Literally 60 to 70 people showed up just like on short notice to come to this thing and go knock on doors. People just wanted to do something.
Knock on every door. My name's Emily, and I'm a volunteer out talking to folks about voting today.
We need to organize a statewide tour.
Garrett came home one day and was just like, hey, I think we should paint our RV green and drive it around the state. As I'm driving down the highway, like moss and branches and things are like flying off of it.
And they say, no, that's not popular here. That's not going to go. People don't like Medicaid expansion.
People shouldn't have had to speak so loudly about this. The politicians should have done something about this crisis, and they've just been playing political football with people's lives.
People thought we were going to get just terrorized going to rural towns. They thought we were going to get Molotov cocktails thrown at us.
We're getting a lot of don't talk to me anymore on this list.
We need people, each and every person, to know what this is and why this is important.
When you get out there and talk to people, you see how popular this is, and then other people throw themselves into the fight.
It's not a matter of reaching across the aisle. It's a matter of going out to ordinary people and reaching out to them. It's more like reaching across the doorstep and rather than the aisle.
Medicaid has touched so many lives here. I'm not just going to be silent anymore. I'm not just going to assume that common sense will prevail.
We have been working for a year for these days.
I just don't want to wake up tomorrow and think I could have done something more, you know?
Can we count your vote? Are you going to vote? How's your voting feel?
Are you a voter?
Yes!
Yes!
All of a sudden, this whole movement has just snowballed into something massive, and we're at the helm. And so you just have to keep going.
If we go out and organize around issues, around values that unite us, if we map out a clear strategy and pursue it relentlessly, we have power.
So it passed in 2018, that massive wave of Democratic voters. The Idaho Medicaid expansion passed. I don't know how many people gained it. I guess more than 53,000 people had already enrolled by early January of this year, 2020, I guess. The number of additional people will be about 90,000. That's what their expectation was as of January, and already 53,000 had enrolled. So who knows? But that's huge. And just from our conversation with Jeff Madrick, you know, like we know the implications of people getting access to health insurance. Now, Medicaid isn't taken at all providers, but you know that's an upside. People go out and vote. There's a material benefit for people.
And when Michael was out in Idaho in October, he participated in that door knocking campaign. Actually,
there you go.
That's great. And this is increasingly an issue that cuts across people's partisan identification.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't have the numbers in front of me for this particular vote, but people across the board,
60%, it won by 61%.
Yeah. People across the board are concerned about healthcare.
Well, I'm going to, tomorrow on the show, we're going to obviously recap the debate that's going to happen tonight. You can check out I think we're going to be doing it on YouTube because I think we can stream C-SPAN, Brendan, and we won't get binged. But we'll cover it on YouTube and all our normal channels, I think video channels as it were. And we're going to be talking about that. But tomorrow, just an interesting New York Times piece on some small sample of voters on the notion of pre-existing conditions. I think the thing that the story of Idaho illustrates is that education about these issues goes a long way. Like, people have a misconception about like where the parties are on this and just the issues more broadly speaking. And if you make it about the issues, there's a lot better chance of winning. You got to divorce it though from party affiliation, but we will talk about that later. All right, folks, I'm sorry about phone calls. Obviously did not have time to get the calls today. I'm a jerk. Typical capitalist boss.
You'll notice the Reclaim ID used green as its color and not, blue in Idaho. So.
Right.
Yeah, Idaho's a red state.
Very much so.
Here is a couple of IMs, then we'll get out of here. Bucket of eels. Please, if he dies before Election Day, it'll be chaos. November 4th, it'll be okay, though. What is the dollar value of the healthcare Trump got last week? I mean, I would imagine it's quite large.
Wait, if he dies before Election Day, it'll be better, right? Because then Pence has to run.
I think he's a little. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Could you really? I have no idea what's going to be more chaotic. Big Fat Daddy. If he dies before the election, there'll be an extreme reaction from the right that it was conspiracy. All the Q nutters are already keen on starting a civil war. It'll be that's from Big Daddy.
Look, this movement is a cult of personality. And if Trump dies, it will be looking for a new head, but it will have a real period of remission.
Tucker's working on that, I think.
Communist Dog, Comrade Sam, diehard Trumplican rep Kevin McCarthy district is poor ag, depressed oil area of 100,000 of his 700,000 constituents are using the ACA, 45% of constituents on Medicare. Have any ideas how I can get Tom Steyer to make hay with McCarthy making HC from his constituents next? I have no idea. All right, two more. Milton Apathy. Dude, I totally think Trump was trying to infect him. I mean, like, I'll tell you what the worst thing is. I'm actually like, that doesn't seem like a wild assertion. Wu-Tang Clan. Remember when Britt Hume thought he was going to be Peter Jennings and then rage quit ABC to go to Fox? Good times. And no, Mekki, didn't Britt Hume's son kill himself after he was disowned by his father for being gay? I believe that is the sequence. I'm not sure if that was the causation. Williamson Crystal Ball. Maybe Britt Hume has COVID too, and the only way he can keep his health care is by lying about it on COVID TV. All right, and one more. Sean. Just became a member, bought Michael's book during your dedication live stream and arrived the day before going on vacation with my girlfriend. I don't know if the grief from losing Michael mixed with my being a little intimidated with this being my first leftist reading, but I nearly fell over laughing with how small the book was. I loved reading. My girlfriend expressed that she wanted to go hiking more instead of staying and reading. This book allowed me to explain how nonsensical this take was and how I rejected her ahistorical framing. Whenever I ever done that much walking. All right, folks. Jamie, Matt, Brendan, good job. Tune in tonight for the debate with me, and also 3 p.m. You can see Nomiki's show at youtube.com. Nomiki show.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid.